My home in Atascocita never seemed too big for me until it was time to leave it. Every room, every corner held memories of my life full and full, despite all the hardships. 67 years is no joke, and I've spent most of that time right here in this cozy one-story house on Birchwood Avenue. Mom, are you sure you got all your meds? Lawrence checked the contents of my bag for the 10th time, as if I were a kid going to summer camp. If I hadn't checked them myself 3 times, do you think you would have noticed a single pill missing? I smiled, looking at my son's concerned face. He was a good boy, my Lawrence, the only child fate had given me. He was tall with brown hair, already graying at the temples, and my blue eyes, the only trait he'd inherited from me. Everything else came from Webster, my late husband. I just don't want you to forget anything. You can't skip your medication after a stroke, he said in a doctor's tone, even though he worked as an engineer for a construction company. Mild stroke. That's what the doctors had said 2 weeks ago when I woke up in the hospital, not realizing how I'd gotten there. Mild is a strange definition for the event that turned my life upside down. Weakness in my left arm, intermittent dizziness, and nightmarish headaches are what stayed with me after that slight. And then there's the fear. Fear that the next time it happened, there would be no one around. That's why I'd agreed to Lawrence's offer to move in with him temporarily. Temporary? That was the word I repeated to myself like a mantra as I watched my son put my things in the trunk of his minivan. Don't worry, Mom. He caught my eye. As soon as you're feeling better, we'll put everything back. I nodded, unable to say a word. My home, my fortress, my sanctuary. I was leaving it behind, and my heart ached with the uncertainty of the future. Lawrence and his wife, Tamantha's house, was in a new neighborhood in Atascocita, only 20 minutes from mine. 2 stories high, with a neat lawn and a freshly painted fence, it looked like a picture from a country life magazine. They'd bought it 5 years ago, shortly after the birth of their second child. Grandma's here! A joyful shout came from the house as soon as we pulled up. Flora, my 10-year-old granddaughter, ran out onto the porch waving her arms. She was followed, a little slower, by 7-year-old Timothy. Their sincere joy was a balm to my soul. Children are a miracle that can heal any pain. Flora immediately began to talk about school, and Timothy bragged about his new constructor, receiving delighted comments from me. Children, let Grandma at least come inside. Tamantha's voice came from the doorway. She stood, arms crossed over her chest, with an expression on her face that could have been called welcoming if it weren't for the tense line of her lips. Tamantha Crystal had been my sister-in-law for 12 years. A skinny blonde with sharp features and piercing brown eyes, she always gave the impression of someone who knew exactly what she wanted and would stop at nothing to get it. When Lawrence first brought her to meet me in Webster, I felt a chill. She was polite, smiling in all the right places, saying all the right words, but something in her gaze made me wary. Lawrence was in love, though, and who was I to interfere? Hello, Tamantha. I tried to smile as warmly as I could. Thank you for taking me in. Don't be silly, Eunice. She pressed her lips together. You're family. Of course we couldn't leave you alone after... What happened? The pause before the last words was almost imperceptible, but I caught it. Like the slight sigh that came with her phrase, it was clearer than any words could say. I was a burden I had to put up with. Come on, Mom, I'll show you to your room. Lawrence took my bag and headed into the house. The guest room on the first floor had been turned into a bedroom for me. It was small but cozy, with a window overlooking the garden. Lawrence explained that they had decided to put me here so I wouldn't have to climb the stairs. Tamantha and I are upstairs, he said, arranging my things in the closet. The kids are too, but you know how they like to make noise. I hope they don't bother you. The kids never bother me. I sat down on the edge of the bed, feeling strangely detached from everything around me. Lawrence, are you sure this is a good idea? Maybe I should go home. I could hire a nurse. Don't even think about it. He shook his head firmly. First of all, it's expensive. Secondly, what kind of nurse can replace a family? No, Mom, you're staying here until you're fully recovered. I didn't argue, partly because I was tired, partly because I realized he was right. I needed help, though it was painful to admit it. The first dinner at my son's house went relatively smoothly. The kids chatted nonstop. Lawrence talked about work. I smiled and nodded in all the right places. Tamantha was polite but not verbose. She served a casserole that was oversalted, but I ate my portion without saying a word. Years have taught me that some battles aren't worth starting. At night, I couldn't sleep for a long time. The unfamiliar bed, the unfamiliar sounds of home, the thoughts of the future, all of it swirled around in my head, keeping me awake. I thought about how things had changed in recent years. Since Webster's death 7 years ago, life had been divided into before and after. 40 years of marriage isn't just a stretch of time, it's an entire universe built by the two of us. When he was gone, I was left alone in a void that could not be filled. For the first year, I just existed, moving by inertia. Then I gradually learned to live again, alone, but with memories that warmed my soul. And 5 years ago, when Lawrence told me that he and Tamantha had found the house of their dreams, but couldn't afford the mortgage with their income, I didn't hesitate to offer help. "I'll wire you money every month," I said at the time. "Consider it my contribution to my grandchildren's future." "Mom, that's too generous." Lawrence was touched, but I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. "Webster left me enough." I stroked his arm. "Besides, I have a good pension. I don't need much on my own." He agreed, but on one condition: Tamantha mustn't know. She has a complicated relationship with money and aid. She wants to feel like we've done everything on our own. I didn't argue, even though I thought it was a strange decision. In my mind, a family is one unit where there is no room for secrets. But Lawrence was a grown man, and I respected his choice. Every month, I transferred nearly half of the monthly mortgage payment to his account, and Tamantha continued to think they were doing fine on their own. Now, lying in the guest room of their house, I wondered if she knew how much of my money was invested in those walls. And how would her attitude toward me change if she knew the truth? In the morning, I woke up to the sound of children's voices and the smell of coffee. It was 7:30 on the clock, earlier than I usually got up at home. I threw on my robe and went into the kitchen, where Tamantha was making breakfast and the kids were sitting at the cereal table. "Good morning," I tried to sound cheerful, despite the headache that started somewhere in the back of my head. "Grandma!" Timothy jumped out of his chair and rushed over to me. "I drew you last night. Would you like to see it?" "Sure, honey." I hugged him, feeling my heart melt at the immediacy of it. "Timothy, sit down and finish your breakfast." Tamantha's voice was stern. "Grandmother is not going anywhere. You can show her later." The boy obediently returned to the table and I headed for the coffee pot. "I made coffee." Tamantha beat me to it. "But can you have it after a stroke? Maybe tea would be better?" Her voice sounded concerned, but her eyes remained cold. I felt irritation rising inside, but I suppressed it. "The doctor said a cup of coffee a day wouldn't hurt." I took the mug. "But thank you for your concern. I just don't want anything to happen to you while you're here." She shrugged. Lawrence would never forgive himself. There it was. "While we have you." A small clarification that spoke volumes. I was a guest, a temporary presence in their lives, and I'd better not cause any trouble. The days rolled on. Lawrence left for work early in the morning and returned late at night. The kids were in school until 3, and then they had various clubs and activities. I spent most of my time alone in the house with Tamantha, who worked remotely doing some projects on the computer. I tried to be helpful, cooking dinner when I felt well enough, helping with cleaning as much as I could. But every time I did something, Tamantha found a way to let me know I was doing it wrong. "Eunice, I appreciate your help, but we always fold the towels differently," she'd say as she moved the laundry I'd just folded. Or, "Oh, you made lasagna. Oh, that's nice. Too bad Timothy doesn't eat eggplant. I'll have to make him something else." Every comment like that was like a little needle sticking under my skin. Not deadly, but painful. One evening, when the kids were already asleep and Lawrence was late for work, Tamantha sat across from me in the living room and suddenly asked, "Have you thought about when you're coming home yet?" I looked up from the book I was reading. "The doctor said it will take about 3 months to make a full recovery," I replied cautiously. "But if my presence is causing problems—" "No, no," she shook her head quickly. "Just wondering. I'm sure you miss your home." "I do," I admitted. "But here I can see my grandchildren every day, and it makes up for the inconvenience." Yeah, the kids adore you, she smiled slightly. But the smile didn't touch her eyes. Though sometimes you spoil them too much, especially Flora. She's not a little girl anymore. She needs to learn responsibility. Aren't grandmothers supposed to spoil their grandchildren? I tried to reduce the conversation to a joke. Grandmothers are there for many things. Tamantha stood up. But the main thing is not to stop parents from raising their children as they see fit. With those words, she left the room, leaving me feeling like I'd been reprimanded. At that moment, for the first time, I seriously wondered how much more I could take in that house, where my every word and action was criticized. But then I remembered the money I was paying into Lawrence's account every month. The fact that without my help, they'd be in a much tighter spot. And the fact that Tamantha didn't even realize it. There was something bitterly ironic about the fact that a woman who was so eager to show her independence and wealth was in fact largely dependent on someone she considered a burden. Maybe one day she'll have to learn the truth, I thought as I closed the book. But I didn't know how soon that would happen, or what the consequences would be. 3 months in someone else's house can seem like an eternity, especially when you're made to feel like you're not wanted. In that time, I had almost fully recovered from my stroke. My left arm no longer went numb as often, dizziness became a rare visitor, and my headaches receded. But with each step toward physical recovery, the emotional tension between Tamantha and me grew. It started with little things, those little everyday frictions that seem insignificant at first. For example, the morning I decided to make pancakes for my grandchildren. "Grandma makes the best pancakes in the world," Flora said excitedly as I kneaded the batter. "Chocolate chip like I like?" Timothy jumped up and down. "Sure, honey," I smiled as I pulled a bag of chocolate chips out of the cupboard. "Just not too much sugar and chocolate," Tamantha intervened, entering the kitchen. "Timothy has a dental checkup next week." "I put just a little," I assured her. "My recipe isn't that sweet." "That's what everyone says." She shook her head skeptically. "Besides, the kids had already had cereal for breakfast." "But we're still hungry, Mom," Timothy whined. "Grandma's pancakes are a special breakfast," said Flora. Tamantha pressed her lips together but didn't say anything and just left the kitchen. The pancakes turned out well, and the children were delighted. But when Lawrence told me later that Tamantha had complained to him about how I was undermining their healthy eating habits, the joy of the little culinary victory was dampened. From that day on, situations like this began to happen more and more often. It seemed that whatever I did drew Tamantha's disapproval. If I helped Flora with her homework, Tamantha thought I was doing too much for her. If I washed the children's clothes, she told me that each item had its own laundry regimen. If I cleaned the living room, it turned out I'd put a vase in the wrong place. "Eunice, we appreciate your help, we really do," she told me once. "But we have our own rules, and it would be nice if you would respect them." "I try," I replied, feeling the irritation building up inside me. "But sometimes it's hard to guess what order I'm breaking." "Just ask if you're not sure." Tamantha's smile was cold. "Or better yet, rest. You don't have to do anything. You're in the position of as a guest." There was that word again, guest. She managed to pronounce it in a tone that made it sound like sponger. Lawrence noticed the growing tension, but tried not to interfere. When I tried to talk to him, he waved it away. "Mom, you know Tamantha, she just likes things to be her way. Don't take it personally." "This is her home," I tried to be fair. I guess I was taking on too much. "It's our home," he corrected me. "And you're not taking on too much. It's just, well, there's friction. That's normal." But the friction was becoming more and more noticeable every day. Particularly tense was the child-rearing situation. Tamantha adhered to strict rules. The schedule was timed to the minute, lessons, chores, limited time for games and TV. I, who grew up in a different time and had different views on parenting, often didn't understand why I couldn't give my child an extra 15 minutes to play a favorite game or allow a second cookie. "Grandma, can I go to bed later tonight?" Flora asked me one day. "There's my favorite unicorn movie on TV." "Sure, honey," I smiled. "Just a half hour later, I guess it's okay." "No, you can't," Tamantha said, who had overheard our conversation. "Tomorrow is school, and we won't break the routine." "But Mom," Flora started. "No buts," Tamantha was adamant. And Eunice, please don't make promises to the children that go against our rules. Flora went to her room with a resentful look, and I was left feeling like I'd been told off like a negligent schoolgirl. Every time I transferred money to Lawrence's account to pay the mortgage, I wondered if Tamantha knew how much I was actually helping their family. In those moments, the bitterness of her attitude toward me became especially acute. I'd never considered my financial assistance a reason for special treatment, but basic respect didn't seem like such a big ask. Are you sure the amount I'm transferring is enough for you? I asked Lawrence one day when we were alone together. If you need more. No, no, Mom, he said, embarrassed. You do too much for us already. We're doing fine. Does Tamantha still not know? It wasn't the first time I'd asked that question. We had an agreement, remember? He looked at me with concern. You didn't tell her, did you? Of course not. I shook my head. But I feel like this secret is only making things more difficult for us. She just has a very strong sense of independence. Lawrence defended his wife, as he always did. It's important for her to think that we've achieved everything on our own. I didn't say that pride was good when it wasn't built on lies. Instead, I just nodded and changed the subject. One day, while cleaning the house, I happened to come across boutique receipts and boxes of expensive shoes. Tamantha didn't skimp on herself. Brand name clothes, designer handbags, jewelry, all of it cost a lot of money. Money that I knew their family could only afford thanks to my monthly help. That same evening, Tamantha returned with another purchase, a new dress that she said was just the thing for an upcoming corporate event. $400 isn't that much for this quality, she said, showing the dress to Lawrence. I sipped my tea in silence, thinking about the fact that that amount was almost half of what I was putting toward their mortgage each month. Tamantha caught my gaze and misinterpreted it. Don't you like it, Eunice? She raised an eyebrow. Too modern for your taste? The dress is lovely, I tried to smile. I just thought it was really cheap. What can you do? Quality things cost money. She shrugged. Fortunately, we can afford it. Lawrence makes good money. Lawrence blushed slightly at those words and quickly turned the conversation to another topic. I saw his embarrassment and understood the reason for it, but I remained silent as I had done so many times before. Every day, however, my patience was wearing thin, especially after the children's party. Flora had wanted to celebrate her 11th birthday in a big way, inviting the whole class, ordering a big cake, putting on a show. Tamantha was against it, thinking it was a waste of money. It's enough to invite 5 or 6 close friends, she insisted. Big parties are a waste of money. But Molly Bates invited everyone last month, Flora argued. And they even had a real magician. We're not the Bates family, Tamantha cut her off. We're on a different budget. Seeing the upset look on her granddaughter's face, I couldn't take it anymore. I could help with the party, I suggested. It would be my gift to Flora. Tamantha looked at me as if I had said something indecent. Thank you, Eunice, but we can organize a party for our daughter, just within reason. I just wanted to help. I felt the color flood my face. And we appreciate it, her tone said otherwise. But you can't teach your kids that you can have whatever you want. That's bad parenting. After that conversation, I went to my room feeling resentful and angry. Not only had I been rejected, but I was also accused of being a bad influence on my grandchildren. At the same time, Tamantha herself didn't think it was shameful to spend hundreds of dollars on another dress or bag. That night, I couldn't sleep for a long time thinking about the situation. Maybe I should have just gone back to my house. I had already recovered enough to live on my own. But the thought of no longer seeing my grandchildren every day was heartbreaking. The next morning at breakfast, Tamantha announced, "We're having dinner with my parents on Saturday. They've been wanting to visit us for a long time." "That's wonderful," Lawrence said. "I've missed your parents." Tamantha's parents, Harold and Vivian Crystal, were peculiar people. Harold, a former military man, believed that everything in life should be subject to strict discipline. Vivian, a housewife, fully shared her husband's views and transferred them to the upbringing of their only daughter. No wonder Tamantha grew up as she was, used to controlling everything and hardly accepting other people's opinions. "I'll cook something special," I suggested. "Maybe my special apple pie?" "No need." Tamantha didn't even look up from her coffee. I've already made up the menu and ordered from the catering company. Catering? I was surprised. But it's expensive, and I could. Eunice. She finally looked at me. I understand that you want to help, but this is my family, my home, and my dinner. I want everything to be perfect. My house. Those words hit the hardest. Sure, legally the house belonged to her and Lawrence. But she should have known how much of my money was invested in it. On the day of the dinner with Tamantha's parents, I purposely stayed away, helping only where I was asked. Flora and Timothy were dressed in their best clothes, their hair carefully combed. Tamantha was running around the house, checking every detail, every little thing. The catering was delivered on time, gourmet meals that looked like they were from the cover of a cooking magazine. Harold and Vivian arrived at 6 sharp, as scheduled. The meeting was formal, handshakes, discreet smiles. The children hugged their grandparents, receiving a pat on the shoulders in return. Eunice, you look good, Vivian remarked, giving me an appraising look. Tamantha said you had some health problems? Yes, a small stroke. I tried to sound casual. But I'm fine now. How long do you plan to stay here? Harold asked bluntly. Dad! Tamantha gave him a warning look. What's the big deal? He shrugged his shoulders. A simple question. Eunice must be thinking about it herself. I do think about coming home, I admitted. The doctors say I've already recovered well enough. That's good, Vivian smiled. My own apartment, my own freedom, what could be better? At dinner, the conversation revolved mostly around Lawrence's job, the kids' studies, and Harold and Vivian's latest trip to Florida. I ate in silence, only interjecting when I was spoken to directly. Your house is beautiful, Vivian said, looking around the living room. You and Tamantha are so lucky to be able to afford a place like this at your age. Thank you, Mother, Tamantha said with a glow. We've worked hard to get here. It's all our own work, Harold added proudly. Young people often rely on their parents for help nowadays, but you've achieved everything on your own. I almost choked on my wine. Lawrence avoided my gaze, concentrating on his plate. Actually, I started, but Tamantha quickly interrupted me. Did Mom tell you that you're going on a cruise next summer? Tell me more. The evening continued, and with each passing minute, I could feel the resentment building inside me. Not only because of the lies about financial independence, but also because of the way Tamantha was presenting me to her parents as a temporary inconvenience they were putting up with out of charity. After dinner, as Harold and Vivian were about to leave, another unpleasant incident occurred. Timothy accidentally knocked over a vase of flowers that was on the coffee table. Water and flowers spilled over the light-colored carpet. Timothy! Tamantha exclaimed in horror. What have you done? I didn't mean to, the boy backed away fearfully. It's okay. I tried to lighten the mood. We'll clean it up. That carpet cost $1,000. Tamantha was furious. It could be ruined. It's just water and flowers. I tried to calm her down. Not ink or red wine. You don't understand. She turned sharply toward me. Some things can't just be replaced. Timothy, seeing his mother's reaction, began to cry. I hugged him, telling him that everything would be okay. This only seemed to make Tamantha angrier. Don't indulge him. She literally pulled her son out of my arms. He needs to understand the consequences of his actions. He's a child and it was an accident. I felt a wave of defensive anger rising in me. That's no excuse for negligence, she cut me off. Harold and Vivian watched the scene with undisguised interest. Lawrence, as always, tried to smooth things over. Let's all calm down. I'm sure the carpet can be saved. He went to the kitchen for rags, while Tamantha continued to reprimand the crying Timothy. I stood by, feeling completely helpless and unwanted. Later, when Tamantha's parents left and the kids were sent to bed, I stayed in the kitchen helping with the dishes. Tamantha was still annoyed about the carpet incident. Don't you think you overreacted? I asked cautiously. Don't you think you interfered too much in the way I raise my children? She parried. I just think children should be supported, not punished for accidents, I tried to say calmly. What do you know about modern parenting? She crossed her arms over her chest. Your methods are 30 years out of date. Some principles don't become obsolete. I felt my voice shake. Love and understanding will always be more important than strictness and punishment. That's why Lawrence grew up so soft, she said, and then bit her tongue, realizing she'd gone too far. There was a heavy silence. I slowly set down the plate I was holding and turned to leave. Eunice, wait, Samantha tried to correct the situation. That's not what I meant. That's exactly what I meant. I stopped in the doorway. And you know what? You have no idea how much effort and love I put into raising Lawrence. Just like you have no idea how much of my money has been invested in this house you're so proud to host your parents in. With those words, I walked out, leaving her in stunned silence. That night, I made a decision. It was time to go home, back to my own space where no one would tell me what to do or how to behave. I was healthy enough to live on my own, and money. Well, maybe it was time to reconsider that issue as well. 3 months of living together turned into an ordeal for all of us. After our late-night conversation, Samantha carefully avoided being alone with me. When we did cross paths, she limited herself to formal greetings and brief phrases about the weather. I responded in the same way, seeing no point in feigned courtesy. Lawrence noticed the change in the atmosphere of the house, but as usual, he preferred not to interfere. Instead, he began to stay late at work more often, returning when the children were asleep and I was secluded in my room. One morning, about a week after the incident, Samantha announced at breakfast, "We're having a big dinner on Saturday. I've invited my parents, Christine and her husband, and Brenda and James." Kristen was Samantha's younger sister, and Brenda was her best friend from high school. "Wonderful," Lawrence said with an enthusiasm that seemed fake to me. "What's the occasion?" "I just thought it had been a while since we'd gotten together," she shrugged, avoiding my gaze. "Plus, I wanted to show you how we'd redecorated the living room." Samantha had recently ordered a new couch and a couple of chairs, items that I knew cost a lot of money, another expense that was indirectly paid for out of my pocket. "Is there anything I can do to help?" I asked, feeling like I had to show at least a minimum of courtesy. "Don't worry." Her tone was cool. "I'll organize everything myself." "Whatever you say," I returned to my toast, feeling mixed feelings of relief and resentment. The night before dinner, I'd wondered if I should be there at all. Should I cite a headache and stay in my room? The temptation was great, but I decided that avoiding the situation was not an option. After all, I was a member of this family too, even though Samantha tried her best to make it clear otherwise. On the day of dinner, the house became an anthill. Samantha ran from the kitchen to the living room, arranging flowers, adjusting napkins, making sure everything was perfect. She'd ordered food from a restaurant, some of the best in Atascocita, she said. I saw the bill casually left on the kitchen table, an amount with 3 zeros that made me shake my head. A month ago, Lawrence had complained about an unexpected expense and asked for a small increase in my monthly mortgage payment. I'd agreed without further question. Now I understood where those unexpected expenses were going. "Kids, be extra careful today," Samantha instructed Flora and Timothy as she helped them get dressed. "No running around or yelling, understand?" "Yes, Mother," they answered in unison, looking unusually quiet in their holiday clothes. I tried to look appropriate for the occasion too, wearing my best dress, a navy blue one with a small brooch Webster had given me for my 30th wedding anniversary. Samantha's parents arrived first at 6 sharp. Harold, taut and formal as ever, shook Lawrence's hand and nodded discreetly at me. Vivian, in an impeccably tailored ivory suit, kissed her daughter and son-in-law and just smiled at me, not hiding her appraising gaze. "Eunice, are you still here?" she asked with feigned surprise. "I thought you'd come home by now." "Not yet." I tried to keep my voice neutral. "But soon." "Oh, come on," Samantha interjected with fake warmth. "Mom can stay with us as long as she wants. We're happy to help." Lawrence gave me an apologetic glance but didn't say anything. The children, thankfully, diffused the situation by rushing over to hug their grandparents. Christine and her husband Alan were next, a young couple who had recently celebrated their first wedding anniversary. Kristen was a younger copy of Samantha, only with softer facial features and personality. Alan, a quiet and somewhat shy man, worked for an IT company and, according to Lawrence, was smart as hell but totally unsuited to small talk. "Aunt Eunice?" Christine was genuinely excited to see me. "How nice to have you here. How's your health?" "Much better, thank you." I smiled at her. Christine always treated me with warmth, which made her sister clearly displeased. Brenda and James Hilltop were the last to arrive. Brenda was the kind of friend everyone secretly disliked but kept inviting out of habit. Loud, with a high-pitched laugh and a habit of interrupting. James, her husband, on the other hand, was so quiet that sometimes it seemed as if he were not in the room at all. Dinner was served in the dining room, decorated with candles and flowers. The dishes from the restaurant looked like works of art. Samantha played the role of the impeccable hostess, smiling, keeping the conversation going, making sure the guests' glasses were not empty. The conversation at the table flowed easily, jumping from one topic to another. I was mostly silent, joining the conversation only when I was addressed directly. Even then, Samantha found a way to take the initiative, as if she feared I might say the wrong thing. "How's your job, Alan?" Lawrence asked, turning to Christine's husband. "Still at that startup?" "Yes, things are going well," Alan nodded. "We've attracted new investments, we're expanding." "God, it must be exhausting, all these computers and numbers," Brenda interrupted. "My James sits in front of a screen all the time, too. I tell him, if it weren't for me, you'd forget what the real world looks like." "Some people like working with numbers," I remarked. My late husband Webster was an accountant and genuinely enjoyed his profession. "Yes, but that was a different time, wasn't it?" Samantha smiled with a slight condescension. "Things were simpler. There wasn't so much competition, so much stress. Eunice has been living with us for a few months now," she said, turning to Brenda and ignoring my comment. "After her, well, health problems." "Oh, how nice of you to take in your mother-in-law." Brenda looked at me with that special expression of sympathy that people usually save for the sick. "A lot of young families aren't willing to make that kind of sacrifice." "No sacrifice at all," Samantha feigned modesty. "It's our duty." "And yet," Brenda persisted, "it must be difficult, especially with kids and work and everything." "It can be hard," Samantha sighed with the look of a martyr, "especially when there are disagreements about parenting." I felt the color flood my face. She was doing it deliberately, making me look like a problem, a burden they had to put up with. "I think different perspectives on parenting can be helpful," Christine interjected, sensing my tension. "Children learn to see the world from different perspectives, as long as they don't undermine parental authority," Samantha said, glaring at me. It was a direct attack, and everyone at the table realized it. There was an awkward pause, which Lawrence interrupted with a hasty change of subject. When dessert was served, a dainty raspberry tart, Timothy, who was sitting next to James, reached for his portion and accidentally elbowed a glass of orange juice. The glass tipped over, and the brightly colored liquid spilled over the white tablecloth, threatening to splash onto Brenda's dress. "Ouch!" Timothy recoiled in horror. "Timothy!" Samantha jumped up from her seat. "How many times have I told you to be more careful?" "I didn't mean to." The boy was ready to cry. "It was an accident." "It's okay." James rushed to his aid. "It happens to everyone." "Not to those who know how to behave," Samantha cut him off, looking around for napkins. I was starting to get up to help when something happened that turned the whole evening, and as it turned out, our lives upside down. Samantha grabbed a kitchen rag that was on the serving table and literally threw it across the table at me. "Wipe the floor, Maid," she said with undisguised contempt. "Since you live in our house, you must be of some use to us." There was a deafening silence in the room. The rag fell into my lap, leaving a wet stain on my dress. I felt everyone's eyes on me, shocked, embarrassed, some with ill-concealed curiosity. Time seemed to stop. My whole life with this woman flashed through my mind. Years of restrained dislike, months of open defiance, weeks of direct insults. And all those years I'd helped them, giving a good portion of my money so they could live in this house Samantha was so proud of. I stood up slowly, straightening to my full height. My hands were shaking, but my voice was firm when I finally spoke. "Prepare for eviction." Samantha stared at me with a look of bewilderment that quickly changed to mockery. "What?" She laughed, looking at the guests as if inviting them to share in the absurdity of the situation. "Are you serious?" "Absolutely." I felt strangely calm, as if I had finally made a decision that was long overdue. "As of today, I'm going to stop paying your mortgage." A laugh froze on Samantha's lips. She turned pale, shifting her gaze incomprehensibly from me to Lawrence. What is she talking about? Her voice trembled. Lawrence looked as if he wanted to fall through the ground. Mom, he began, but I interrupted him. 5 years. I looked around at the stunned guests. For 5 years, I've been transferring money every month so your family could afford this house. Money that covered almost half of the mortgage payment. That's not true, Samantha tried to keep a straight face, but fear flashed in her eyes. Lawrence, tell her it's not true. My son sat with his head down, unable to look at his wife or me. Lawrence? Samantha's voice became hysterical. I've been meaning to tell you, he mumbled at last. I just couldn't find the right moment. You knew? She was screaming now. All this time you knew and let me think we were doing it on our own? You were always so proud of our independence. He looked completely miserable. I was afraid you'd take it as a humiliation. So, instead of being thanked for my help, I got the role of a servant in your house, I said calmly but firmly. Well, that's over with. I'm going back to my place tomorrow, and you can start thinking about how you're going to pay the mortgage on your own. There was silence around the table. Everyone present seemed petrified, watching the drama unfold. Samantha stood with her mouth open, unable to utter a single word, her face gradually turning the color of a ripe beet. Lawrence sat with his head down, his shoulders slumped under the weight of the secret he'd uncovered. I beg your pardon, I said with dignity. I think I've had enough family dinners for one night. I headed out of the dining room, feeling dozens of eyes on me. In the hallway, I heard Brenda whisper loudly, "Oh my God, what a twist!" followed by Samantha's loud sob. In my room, I began to methodically pack my things. The decision was instantaneous. I wouldn't spend one extra night in this house. Enough humiliation, enough pretending. It was time to go back to my own home where no one would throw rags at me and call me a maid. I hadn't had time to pack half of my things when the door opened abruptly. Samantha stood on the threshold, disheveled, mascara smeared and eyes blazing. How could you? She hissed as she entered the room. How could you humiliate me like that in front of everyone? Humiliate you? I turned to her, feeling the anger boiling up inside me again. What about when you threw a rag at me and called me a servant? Wasn't that a humiliation? It was just a stupid joke. She flailed her arms. I didn't want you to take it seriously. A joke. I raised an eyebrow. No one at the table was laughing, Samantha. Even your parents looked shocked. You don't understand. She shifted to a more pleading tone. I was on edge about the spilled juice, the expensive tablecloth. It was an accident. There was nothing accidental about it. I continued to put things away. You showed me how you really felt about me, and I showed you mine. At that moment, Lawrence came into the room. He looked lost, looking from his wife to his mother and back again. The guests have gone, he said quietly. Mother, please, let's discuss this calmly. There's nothing to discuss. I zipped up my bag. My decision is made. I'm coming home and I won't help you with the mortgage anymore. But we won't be able to make the full payment. Samantha went from anger to panic. Lawrence, tell her! It's true, Mom. He looked embarrassed. Without your help, it's going to be very hard for us. We may have to sell the house. You're adults. I looked at them both. You'll find a way. Maybe Samantha will get a full-time job instead of her remote projects, which are more fun than income. How dare you? She flared up again. My projects have prospects. Maybe, I shrugged. But before those prospects materialize into real money, you'll have to rethink your budget. You can start by giving up restaurant food for family dinners and designer clothes. Samantha looked like I'd slapped her. Lawrence cast a pleading look at me. Mom, please, I know Samantha was wrong, but do you really want us to lose the house? Think of the children. Don't use your grandchildren as a tool of manipulation. I shook my head. They won't be left on the street. At worst, you'll have to move to a smaller apartment. It's not the end of the world. Eunice. Samantha suddenly changed tactics, her voice softer. I was wrong. I'm sorry for what I said. I didn't mean it. I looked directly into her eyes and saw not remorse there, but fear. Fear of losing the comfort of a comfortable, expensive home, the ability to spend money on my whims. It wasn't an apology, but an attempt to maintain the status quo. Samantha, I said calmly. I didn't help you all these years to gain power or control. I did it out of love for my son and my grandchildren, but there is a limit to how much disrespect I am willing to tolerate. I will treat you with respect, she stepped forward. I swear it won't happen again. Words are worthless if they aren't followed by sincere feelings. I took the bag. Lawrence, can you take me home now? Or should I call a cab? My son looked utterly crushed, torn between loyalty to his wife and understanding my position. I'll drive you, he finally said, but please reconsider. I've already thought it over. I headed for the door. I had made my decision. Samantha looked at me with a mixture of anger and despair, but she didn't try to convince me anymore. She knew she had lost. Saying goodbye to my grandchildren was the hardest part. They didn't understand why I was leaving so suddenly, or why Mom and Dad looked so upset. I promised them that they would be able to come visit me and that we would call each other, but tears welled up in Flora's eyes, and Timothy hugged me tightly, not wanting to let go. The drive to my house was passed in heavy silence. Lawrence started to speak several times, but then stopped, unable to find the right words. It wasn't until we pulled up that he finally pulled himself together. Mom, I know I screwed up. I should have told Samantha about your help from the beginning. And I should have stopped her when she started treating you badly. Yeah, I should have. I wasn't about to soften the blow. But you always avoided confrontation, Lawrence. You always took the path of least resistance. I wanted everyone to be happy. He looked so young and lost in that moment that my heart shook. But I ended up making everyone miserable. Not everyone. I put my hand on his shoulder. You gave your children a good home and a stable childhood. That means a lot. And now we could lose all of that. He shook his head. Without your help, we really won't be able to make the full mortgage payment. You have options. I tried to sound reasonable. Samantha could get a full-time job. You can refinance your mortgage for a longer term. At the very least, you could sell the house and buy something more modest. Samantha will never settle for a smaller house. He grinned bitterly. You know how obsessed she is with status, the impression she makes on others. That's her problem, not yours. I opened the car door. Thanks for the ride. And Lawrence, I'm still your mother. I still love you, but I won't fund disrespecting me. With those words, I got out of the car and headed toward my home, a place that for the past 3 months had seemed so far away, almost unreal. As I opened the door, I felt the tension of the last few weeks begin to let go. Here I was, the mistress. Here no one could tell me what to do or how to behave. The first thing I did was call the bank and cancel the automatic payments to Lawrence's account. It was a strange feeling, as if I had cut the invisible thread that had connected me to my son and his family all these years. But along with the slight sadness came relief. Now my money would be spent on me, not on the whims of a woman who considered me a burden. In the evening, the phone rang. I was sure it was Lawrence, but Samantha's name popped up on the screen. I hesitated, but then answered. Eunice. Her voice sounded unusually soft. I wanted to apologize again for yesterday. I shouldn't have said what I said. No, you shouldn't have. I wasn't going to make it easy for her. I understand that you're upset, she continued, and you have every right to be. But please think about the consequences. We could lose the home the kids love so much. The kids will adapt, I said firmly. Kids in general are very adaptable. The main thing is for parents not to transmit their anxiety to them. Lawrence says we're going to have to tighten our belts in the next few months, she said, her voice a little pitiful. Maybe even cancel Flora's summer camp. She's been looking forward to it. This is it. Manipulation through grandchildren, just as I expected. Samantha was predictable in her attempts at pity. I'm sure you'll find a way out, I tried to say calmly. Maybe you should sell some designer handbags. The last one you bought cost, if I'm not mistaken, $800? There was silence. Then Samantha said with noticeable irritation, I don't understand why you're punishing the kids for my mistake. It's not fair. I'm not punishing the kids, I objected. I just stopped sponsoring a family that didn't appreciate my help. There's a difference. What do you want me to do? She asked bluntly. For you to start helping us again? It's not about what you should do, Samantha, I sighed. It's about who you need to be. A person who genuinely respects others, not just pretending to because of money. I can change. Her voice sounded almost pleading. Just give me a chance. Maybe. I wasn't sure if I believed it myself. But not for money. If you really want to change, do it not for financial help, but for your family. For a healthy relationship between all of us. After that conversation, a week passed. Lawrence called every day, talking about the kids, cautiously mentioning that he and Samantha were discussing options for solving their financial problems. He didn't ask for my help directly anymore, but in every conversation I could sense the hope that I would change my mind. On Sunday, he brought the kids to visit me. They were quieter than usual, as if they sensed the tension between the adults. Flora asked when I was coming back to live with them, and I had to explain that I'll be living in my own house now, but they can always come visit me. Mom says we might be moving too, Flora said, watching my reaction. To an apartment, because a house costs too much. Sometimes families have to move, I tried to say calmly. But it's not where you live that matters. It's that you're together. But I love our house. Her lower lip trembled. I have friends there. My room, my garden. I hugged her, feeling my heart clench with pain. Perhaps I had been too cruel. Maybe I should have compromised, cut back on the help gradually rather than cutting it all off at once. But then I remembered the rag thrown at me, the contemptuous maid, all the months of humiliation and disrespect. No, I had done the right thing. Sometimes it takes grit to change unhealthy relationship dynamics. When Lawrence was about to take the kids away, I took him aside and quietly said, I'm not changing my mind about regular payments, but if you're really in danger of losing your home, I can help with a down payment on an apartment. He looked at me with gratitude, which was quickly replaced by embarrassment. Thank you, Mom. But I think we need to learn to manage on our own. You were right. We've relied on your help for too long without really appreciating it. It was the first mature thing I'd heard him say in a long time. Perhaps this whole crisis had a positive side. My son was finally starting to grow up. The next day, Samantha showed up on my doorstep. She looked different, without her usual flawless makeup, wearing plain clothes instead of designer outfits. May I come in? She asked, her voice lacking her usual self-assurance. I invited her into the living room and offered her tea. She sat down on the couch, nervously rubbing the strap of her bag. I got a job, she said without preamble, at a marketing agency, full-time, 9 to 6. Congratulations. I was genuinely surprised. It's a good decision. Lawrence and I also decided to sell one of the cars, she continued. And I've put most of my designer stuff up for sale. Serious changes. I watched her carefully, trying to see where this conversation was going. We're doing everything we can to keep the house. She finally looked up at me. Not for herself, but for the kids. It's going to be hard for them to move, to change schools, to lose friends. I understand, I nodded. And I respect your efforts. Eunice, she took a deep breath. I didn't come here to ask for money. I came to tell you that you were right. I behaved terribly, not just that night, but all these months. I didn't appreciate your help because I didn't know about it. And I was jealous of your intimacy with Flora and Timothy. I felt like you were trying to take my place. That confession took me by surprise. I didn't expect such candor from Samantha. I never wanted to take your place, I said softly. I just wanted to be a part of my grandchildren's lives. I know that now, she nodded. And I do regret my behavior. Not because of the money, but because it was wrong, unworthy. There were tears in her eyes, and for the first time since I'd known her, I believed she was being sincere. I appreciate your words, I said after a pause. And your actions. They speak volumes. I'm not asking you to come back to us or to resume payments. She shook her head. I just wanted you to know that I realize I was wrong, and I'm doing everything I can to change. When she left, I sat in silence for a long time, thinking about our conversation. Something had changed in Samantha. Or maybe it was just the side of her personality that she used to hide behind a mask of self-assurance and snobbery. I wasn't going to resume financial aid right away. Some lessons had to be fully learned, and that took time. But maybe in the future, if Samantha really changed, we could find a new form of relationship. one based on mutual respect rather than money and obligation. In the meantime, I've decided to focus on myself and my life. It was time to remember who Eunice Pembroke was beyond her roles as mother, mother-in-law, and grandmother. I still had many years ahead of me, and I intended to live them with dignity and on my own terms. Returning to my own home was like a breath of fresh air after a long stay in a stuffy room. For the first few days, I just enjoyed the quiet and the opportunity to do what I wanted, when I wanted, and how I wanted. No one commented on my actions, rolled their eyes at my suggestions, or made me feel superfluous. My dwelling greeted me with a layer of dust and a slight musty odor, but I enthusiastically set about cleaning it. I opened all the windows, letting the spring breeze blow out the stale air, re-washed the curtains and linens, and wiped down every surface. The physical work helped keep my mind off what had happened, though the memory of Tamantha's expression when I'd announced the end of my financial aid kept coming back to me. Had I been too cruel? That question haunted me, especially at night as I lay in my bedroom, listening to the silence of the house. Grandchildren didn't deserve to suffer because of adult conflict, but didn't I deserve respect? Should I have continued to sponsor a family where I was treated like a burden? On the fourth day after I returned, the phone rang. It was Christine, Tamantha's younger sister. Aunt Eunice? Her voice sounded unsure. Am I interrupting? Of course not, sweetheart. I was genuinely happy to hear from her. How are you? Fine, thank you. She was quiet. I'm calling to see how you're doing. After the other night, I'm fine, I assured her. Back in my house, enjoying the peace. That dinner was a nightmare, Christine sighed. I'm so sorry for what happened. You don't have to apologize for your sister. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. Everyone is responsible for their own actions. You know, her voice got quieter, like she was afraid someone was listening. Tamantha got a job at a marketing agency full-time. This news took me by surprise. Tamantha, who had prided herself for years on her creative projects with flexible hours, had suddenly accepted a regular office job? Really? I couldn't hide my surprise. That's unexpected. She and Lawrence are trying to stay afloat, Christine continued. They'd sold one car. Tamantha had a bunch of her designer stuff for sale. She's even talking about taking Timothy out of private school and transferring him to public school. I remained silent, digesting the information. So they really were on the verge of financial ruin without my help. Part of me felt grimly satisfied that this was the result of lies and showmanship. But another part was worried about the grandchildren, about their stability. How are the children? I asked. Are they all right? Flora's a little confused, Christine admitted. She doesn't understand why you left and why her parents are always arguing about money. Timothy seems to notice the change less, but he misses you too. I miss them too, I sighed. I hope Lawrence will bring them to visit me. He would, Christine assured me. He said he wanted to visit you this weekend. I sat in my chair for a long time after I'd talked to Christine, looking out the window at my small garden, which was beginning to come back to life after the winter. So Tamantha had gotten a job. It was an unexpected turn, showing that she was willing to make a major change to maintain her lifestyle. But was she doing it sincerely, or only out of financial necessity? And did it matter if the result was the same? She was finally beginning to take responsibility for her family's well-being. On Saturday, as Christine had promised, Lawrence arrived. Alone, without the children, which surprised me and disappointed me a little. They're at Tamantha's parents', he explained, noticing my questioning look. I wanted to talk to you alone. We sat down in the living room. Lawrence looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes and new wrinkles on his forehead. The events of the last few weeks had clearly taken their toll on him. How are you, Mother? He asked, taking the cup of tea from my hands. I'm fine, I smiled. I'm glad to be home. How are you? He took a deep breath as if gathering his strength. It's hard, to be honest. Tamantha and I barely talk, except about the kids and money. She's still mad at me for keeping your help from her all these years. She has a right to be angry, I pointed out. You lied to her. I know. He rubbed his face with his hands. I screwed up big time. With her, with you, with everything. I thought I was making things better for everyone. But in reality, I just made it harder. Sometimes the truth is painful, but necessary. I looked at my only son with love and sadness. You've always tried to please everyone, Lawrence. Ever since you were a child. Do you remember how you tried to make up with your father and me after every quarrel? He smiled faintly. I do. I hated conflict. And you still do. I reached out and squeezed his hand. But sometimes they're necessary for growth, for change. Christine said she called you. He changed the subject. Did she tell you about Samantha's job? Yes, I nodded. It's unexpected. For me too, he grinned. I'd never thought she'd take an office job with a fixed schedule, but there wasn't much of a choice. Without your help, we can barely make ends meet. I heard you sold your car? Yeah, my SUV, he shrugged. Now I take public transportation. It's kind of funny. I haven't taken a bus since I was a student. How's Samantha coping with all these changes? I couldn't help but ask. Lawrence was silent for a moment, searching for words. She's adapting. Sometimes she breaks down and cries or screams, but then she pulls herself together and continues to function. She's stronger than I thought. People are often stronger than we think, I said, especially when they have no choice. Mom, he looked up at me, his eyes wide with pain. I know I don't have the right to ask, but the kids really miss you. Can I bring them to visit? Without Samantha, of course. Of course you can. I felt my heart clench at the thought of my grandchildren. I miss them too. They can come as often as they want. Thank you. He visibly relaxed. Samantha said she wouldn't mind. She knows she's been horrible to you. Did she apologize? I asked her directly. In her own way, Lawrence answered evasively. She's not one to admit her mistakes easily. But the fact that she is willing to let the children go to you without her presence is something. We talked some more about everyday things, about his work, about Flora and Timothy's school progress. Before leaving, Lawrence hugged me tighter than usual and whispered, I love you, Mom, and I'm sorry I let all this happen. I love you too, I replied, tears welling up in my eyes. And remember, no matter what happens between Samantha and me, you're always my son. After he left, I decided it was time to stop dwelling on the past and start building a new life. I had been living my son's family's interests for too long, forgetting my own. It was time to change that. The next day, I pulled out of my closet a folder of brochures and flyers that I had collected over the years, but had been putting off for later. A gardening course at the local community center, a book club at the library, a volunteer program at the nursing home. The opportunities were many, I just had to decide to take the first step. I started with gardening classes. I have always loved digging in the ground, growing flowers and vegetables, but I had never done it systematically, with an understanding of the scientific side of the process. The first class was a revelation. I met a group of like-minded people, mostly women of my age, who shared not only gardening tips, but also stories from their lives. I have 4 grandchildren, said Doris, an energetic woman with a short haircut and an infectious laugh. And I adore them all, but I've learned to set boundaries. Tuesdays and Thursdays are my days when I only do what I want to do. And I've completely reevaluated my life since my divorce, shared Margaret, a quiet woman with wise eyes. It was scary at first, but then I realized that I was finally free to do what I wanted to do, not what others expected of me. Their stories resonated with my soul. I told them a little about myself, omitting the most painful details, but mentioning that I had recently decided to live more independently, less interfering in the affairs of my adult children. Good for you, Doris nodded approvingly. Too many women of our generation are dissolving into their children's families, forgetting to take care of themselves. After class, we went to a small cafe nearby, and for the first time in a long time, I felt part of a community where I was valued for who I was, not for my role as mother or grandmother. 2 weeks later, Lawrence brought the children. Flora and Timothy literally flew into the house, hugging me so tightly, as if they were afraid I would disappear. Grandma, I missed you so much. Flora clung to me. Why did it take you so long to come? I needed some time to myself, sweetheart. I stroked her hair. But now you can come visit whenever you want. I can? Timothy's eyes shone. Can I stay the night? Please. I looked at Lawrence, who nodded with a smile. If Grandma doesn't mind, you can stay for the weekend. Those were two of the happiest days I'd had in a long time. We baked cookies, played board games, I read to them before bed, just like old times. Flora helped me in the garden, showing an unexpected interest in plants, and Timothy was delighted with my old construction set, preserved from Lawrence's childhood days. When Lawrence came to pick up the kids on Sunday evening, they begged to stay more, but school the next day left no choice. Next weekend? Flora asked hopefully, looking at her father and me. We'll see, Lawrence replied diplomatically. Mom may have plans. As the children got into the car, Lawrence lingered on the porch. Thank you, Mom, he said quietly. They hadn't been this happy in a long time. At home, tense. Still? I frowned. Tamantha's trying, he sighed. He really is. But the stress is taking its toll. She's not used to this kind of life working 9 to 6, cutting back on everything, denying herself the pleasures she used to enjoy. But you're managing the payments? That was the question that bothered me the most. So far, he nodded. Barely, but we're getting by. If nothing changes, we'll be able to stay afloat. Good, I was relieved. And, Lawrence, I'm proud of you. You took responsibility, didn't take the easy way out. He smiled embarrassedly, reminding me of the boy he'd once been. Better late than never, right? After they left, I returned to the house, feeling a strange mixture of happiness and sadness. Happy about the time spent with my grandchildren, and sad that that time was limited. But perhaps it was the right thing to do. I will always love them and support them, but my life no longer has to revolve only around them. The following months brought a new routine and new discoveries. I became an active member of the gardening club, signed up for a watercolor painting class I'd been dreaming of for years, but had been putting off, and started volunteering at the local library twice a week. My life was filled with new people, interests, and impressions. The kids came every weekend, sometimes staying overnight. I helped Flora with her homework, taught Timothy simple cooking skills, and we worked together in the garden. These moments were precious, and I enjoyed every one of them, but without the guilt when they left, and I went back to my chores. One day, about 3 months after I returned home, an unexpected phone call came. It was Tamantha. Eunice? Her voice sounded unsure. I was wondering if I could pick up the kids today. Lawrence is late at work, and I unexpectedly ran out of a meeting early. Of course. I was surprised by the call, but I didn't show it. They'll be happy to see you. When she arrived, I noticed a change. She looked simpler, without excessive makeup and expensive accessories, wearing ordinary jeans and a sweater. But the main difference was in her eyes. They seemed softer, less arrogant. The kids are in the garden, I pointed to the back door, helping me with the new beds. She nodded and hesitated for a moment, as if she wanted to say something but didn't dare. Is everything all right? I asked. Yeah, it's just... She took a deep breath. I wanted to say that you were right, about everything. I didn't appreciate what I had, didn't realize how much you did for us. It took a financial crisis and the prospect of losing my home for me to realize how privileged my life had been. I remained silent, not knowing how to respond to this unexpected admission. I'm not apologizing, she continued. I don't expect you to help us again. I just wanted you to know that I realized my mistakes. I'm grateful that you let the kids come to see you. They love you very much. I love them too, I said simply. It's not their fault. She nodded and headed out into the garden. I watched through the window as Flora and Timothy rushed towards her as she hugged them, laughing at something Timothy was showing her. They looked like a normal, happy family. And for the first time in a long time, I felt no bitterness looking at them. In the evening after they left, I sat on the veranda, watching the sunset and reflecting on the vicissitudes of life. Who would have thought that a humiliating incident with a rag would lead to such a fundamental change in our family dynamic? Tamantha got a job, learned to live more modestly, Lawrence finally started acting like a grown man, and I found freedom and a new life full of possibilities. I didn't regret my decision to end my financial aid. It was a necessary step, painful but healing in the long run. Sometimes people need to fall to learn how to get back up on their own. My phone vibrated a message from Doris inviting me to dinner tomorrow night with a group from the gardening club. Margaret will bake her famous apple pie, she wrote enthusiastically. I smiled and replied in agreement. Tomorrow will be a new day, with new joys and worries, and I would meet it with an open heart, ready for whatever it would bring. My life continued, full of new discoveries and opportunities. I was no longer just a mother, mother-in-law, or grandmother. I was Eunice Pembroke, a woman who at 67 had finally learned to put herself first without feeling guilty about it. And that was the most important accomplishment of my life.